random 6-star that we do not have. So basically, it's every 6-star from patch 1.0 to 1.9, and whatever 6-star you do not have from within those patches, excluding the limited ones like Jew and Lucy, you can actually get your hands on. So of course, I've been seeing a lot of people kind of compile up a list of characters that they wish that they had, and I've been seeing a lot of people talk about, what units they do have and what are their potential options and what should I be most excited for. So I decided that I wanted to make a video about it, talking about, well, what are some of the best options? Because believe me, there really are some great options you can get. There's also the $30 selector, the $30 special multi-pack that you can get if you are looking to spend some money. What it is a special 30 it's a 3x multi that guarantees you a 6-star in each of the emojis. So it's 3 emojis, each of them have a 6-star guarantee from 1.0 to 1.9, and you get to choose which of the multi that you want to keep. So if you potentially hit a character that you really like, for example, you hit Windsong off of the multi, then you might want to keep it because Windsong, she's really good. Or, you hit another character you might like Marcus or like Isolde, etc. So that's generally what this video is going to be for. It's going to be me explaining all of the characters from 1.0 to 1.9 and which are some of the key ones you should be most excited for. So without further ado, let's get right started. Let's talk about it. So the first way we're going to do this is we're going to do this from oldest unit from newest unit to oldest unit. So we're going to do from patch 1.9 first, all the way down to patch 1.0. So anyway, let's get right into it. Let's start with the first video and the first character starting right now. Alright, coming up as the first option is going to be none other than Kakania. Kakania is going to be the first unit that I'm going to be mentioning here because she is, quite frankly, one of, if not the best sustained in this entire game. I would actually say that Kakania is the best sustained, and that is because she is just basically a fantastic mitigator of all sorts of damage because of how her empathy works. If you guys don't know, she takes active damage to herself based on whatever teammate gets hit. So one person gets hit for 500 damage, for example, she can take half of that damage and she's going to take it to herself. This is really good for the more difficult and hard-hitting bosses that's in the game, like some of the newer raids or some of the late game content like in roguelike, where you really do need some type of defensive pivot that can help you get into get you into the safer space of just kind of getting rid of some of the more problematic enemies, or just having that general survivability. And what I would like to say about Kakania is I feel like Kakania is like a new 6, not in the way where 6 was that unit who always provided a lot of buffs, always provided a lot of debuffs. He also provided Empower Incantation, other great bonuses. That's not really the reason. A lot of people really loved 6 for his natural ability to just be fit in any type of team, no matter what the team was trying to do. If it was standard offense, if it was a crit DPS, if it was, more of a gimmicky themed team where you're more so focusing on a certain gimmick to make the unit shine, 6 could always fit in those teams. And Kakania is the very same way. Even in undifficult content like Limbo. Like Limbo's not very hard. It's more like medium tier content, right? You can still throw Kakania in the team and have an easier time with the stage if you are struggling, or you just want to have a general safety option. So that's one of the really cool things about Kakania. But the general TR about Kakania, as I mentioned before, is she's a fantastic mitigator of damage. She takes damage and she puts it into this little thing called empathy. Empathy is a certain capped limit based on her total max HP. So however much of her max HP is, and it's put into the empathy bar. So for example, if you have my HP, which is 16k, you have a total empathy of close to like 3k. And basically, the more damage that you take and she takes, it gets put into that empathy meter. And when it reaches full, she stops doing the effect. But you can use that empathy to use more powered up versions of her main 2 skills right here, this being an attack skill and this being her ultimate, which has an amazing modifier, so she can actually kind of deal a little bit of burst damage in that regard, because that's why she has the tag, because she can actually deal a little bit of better damage this way. And she also has a really cool buff where she can sacrifice a bit of her own HP and give the target solace, which is a flat attack buff on top of the on cast of empathy. So it's actually a little bit more than the 300. It's actually a lot more if you really fill up the empathy before you let it go, which is actually really, really cool. You know, like it gives your unit like so much more attack, which is pretty rare because we don't have a flat attack buff. We have percentile buff, you know, attack and stuff like that, which doesn't really come up in too much general content, but having a flat attack for 300 is still actually pretty massive, of course, on top of your current empathy value. So again, if you happen to get Kakania, congratulations. You got a sustain that literally is fittable in any team that you want, so long as you wanted the reason to use Kakania. And that's why she's a very, very good unit, and why it's actually a very good thing that you actually did get her. Alright, the next unit that I'm going to be recommending is going to be Windsong. And Windsong is a part of patch 1.8, and she is quite frankly known as the strongest single target DPS in this entire game. Why? Because she has a very interesting gimmick in how she likes to be played. What you typically do with Windsong is you cast this skill here, Practicability, to build up pre-preparation stacks of Preparation Windsong to use to combine to a rehabilitation skill. You ideally want to get around like anywhere between like 4 to 5, sometimes 6, depending on like how lucky you can get and how, you know, the surface level of what's going on in the content. And then you follow that all off with her ultimate, which then uses all 6 of those stacked casts that you have just sitting in the deck as a follow-up attack. And one of the really, really powerful things about Windsong is she has built-in crit rate into critical damage conversion, and she also has a really nice modifier with this one attack. A 550 modifier with critical rate, critical damage conversion equals big damage, especially with the type of support she can get, because she's naturally a mental character. So some of the great options that's on here like Vila, Mercuria can really amplify her damage, and it's also really not hard to get her to 100% because Windsong herself has a measure effect as a part of one of her buffs, which also gives her additional crit rate and crit damage. And of course her own card can also really help with getting special damage dealt up as well. You can also use special other cards like Outside the City as another way to give her more crit rate, give her more crit damage. There's a lot of ways that you can really easily pump Windsong to 100% without relying on measure or any other external buffs. But still, like even looking at mine, she's basically at like what, 60%, like 68% crit rate, right? This is 68% crit rate. All I need is like, you know, Vila's buff, and I'm already over capping my buff by 8%. And then of course this is not including the measure. This is not also including other potential supports that I can run like Mercuria, who's going to give her yet another 20% crit rate, you know what I mean? And then of course Merc, since mine is P2, would actually give her 50% crit damage instead, which is pretty strong, you know what I mean? Now of course not everyone's going to have P2 Merc. It's still 30% crit damage, which is still very strong. And generally put, whenever you have the opportunity to just blow something up single target wise, Windsong is easily one of the best units you can take. I mean, it's so funny to see her just stack up a bunch, even if you have to short stack, which is like you use like 2 to 3 casts of the 3-star because you're doing something more like Limbo or something, and you just kind of go off. You know, that's really just the cool thing about Windsong. But I will say this though. If you are happy about Windsong, but you don't have other supports like Vila, like Mercuria, or even technically Semmelweis, who's free, she's still gonna deal a lot of damage. Even though I know a lot of people put that combination together of a Vila Windsong because of Vila's obvious very high 30% critical rate buff and 40% critical damage buff that she can get because Windsong is mental, so she gets the extra benefit bonus. But she can still really alleviate a lot of the stages that are single target related. Even some of the situations that could be AoE, you can actually still get away with using Windsong because of just how strong she is natively. So yeah, if you pull Windsong, congratulations. You pulled, quite frankly, the best AoE DPS in the entire game, while the best AoE DPS in the game is being Lucy. But Windsong's best single target, she's incredibly strong, she's very powerful, so she's going to be a very worthwhile pull. Even to this day in CN, she's still number 1. she's still number one. She has not been topped yet. Now, we don't know with the new limited that's coming. Usually limiteds are kind of where it gets a little shaky for our prominent units, but we don't know yet until the unit comes out and we start seeing some numbers and we see what that new unit's all about. But for what it is currently, Windsong is number one, and she will continue to be number one for many, many months going forward. Alright, the next option I'm going to be recommending is none other than Vila, also known as what is the best healer in this entire game, and quite frankly, one of the best supports in this game as well. Vila is very, very good because she is, quite frankly, a fantastic support healer. If you guys don't know, she is a unit who can buff both crit rate and crit damage, which is automatically tier infinity for me, because if you guys don't know a little bit about reverse 1999 and where the meta goes, is I want to say most of the game's prevalent units outside of later, like 2.3 onward, there's a little bit of variance in what is considerably meta and what's actually viable for like stages going forward, like the poison team that eventually comes around in 2.3, or the new impromptu team that's in 2.4, or the J Babel team. But every unit, right? Even supports, or even like, well, I shouldn't say sustains, no, but every unit from DPS to support wanted to build crit, and having a unit that can buff crit rate on the fly and crit damage, come on, man, instant tier infinity. But one of the really cool things about Vila is that she has a special, unique incantation where whenever she casts her ult, she goes into a special form called Raslaka. Now, again, if I say that wrong, I apologize. But basically, it basically powers up a lot of her skills. So what this becomes, instead of Song of Generosity, it becomes Song of Passion, which actually then adds a modifier buff to whatever incantation level to whatever a target uses. So if I use a 2-star incantation on that buff target, it's now getting a 120% modifier boost. If I use 3-star, then it's getting a 200% modifier buff, which I just talked about earlier with Windsong, for example. This is why Vila Windsong is such a dangerous combo, because you're getting 30% crit rate, 40% critical damage, and then 200% modifier buff off of her strongest skill that she's casting as a modifier, as she's casting as an attack, while also having that crit rate critical damage conversion, helping you scale up your damage. That's why it's such a dummy combo. But anyway, or even just for other units, another prime example of how this is a dummy combo is Lucy. Lucy's primarily bursting with her skills and follow-up, and since her follow-up is counted as an incantation, guess what? It gets influenced by this, which is pretty sick. It's pretty cool. But anyway, long story short, she can buff and she can also heal. Now, when she's in her regular form, her heal is just a 1-target heal and it grants sturdiness, which is actually still pretty good because that's a cushion of protection. But when she's in her Raslaka state, she can heal an additional 2 more times. Also, she's also able to automatically heal off of one of her inheritances if she does not actively take an action. This is really good when she's in her Raslaka state, because what this means is when you cast her special incantation that she gets when she's in ult, which is an automatic Moxie +1 and Eureka +1 to that target, which is a really, really good way for her to keep her Moxie up. So that means you can continuously chain ultimate, or you could push someone even closer to their ultimate respectfully. You can basically get an AoE heal out of the turn. So you're still getting a heal, and that's really good. If you don't even cast anything with Vila, you can get 2 heals in that turn for AoE, which is pretty good. That's pretty good. I mean, it's not really nothing crazy to really understand. She's a fantastic healer, fantastic support. She's not just limited to mental. I've always seen people kind of throw that debate out about Vila, but literally every single DPS going forward wants Vila, because every single DPS wants to build crit rate, crit damage. That's literally just, it's just mashed potatoes and gravy. Like it's the perfect combo. It's the most standard combo. It's like red beans and rice. Like, I mean, you know the combo, you know what it's supposed to do, and that's why it works the way that it works. So That's why I am recommending Vila. She's very good. She's very strong for what she does. She's a very potent healer. And even still to this day, she still has not really been uninterrupted in her dominance for team slot. Like, she hasn't really been uninterrupted. There is a new healer for Tutu that came out, and a lot of people have been really praising her. So of course I am a little bit on the hesitant time when I say this. But since I don't really know too much about Fatutu just yet, I haven't really taken a look into her kit, by the way, for the purposes of this video. But I won't really spoil or say anything to try to misinform anyone. So I will just say, at the current time, Vila still is a fantastic support. So that's why I'm recommending, if you do end up getting Vila off of your free 6-star, be happy, because she's very good. All right, another really good option here is going to be Isolde. Isolde is, quite frankly, it's still one of the best supports out in the game because of her incredible damage amplifying potential. She can also be a great pivot for, again, many of the game's most focused DPS, and again, being a great anchor for crit damage DPSers like Lucy, like Windsong, like, well, technically Marcus in a way, because she can actually be built for crit due to support with Vila. But the really cool thing about Isolde is she's a follow-up support that can be built for crit, which, again, very good. She can debuff critical defense down by a pretty huge amount, maximum being 50%, and she can also give you power burst every single turn when she's in her finale state. So basically, how Isolde works is she has a special heat effect, right? Where, since she gives everyone stacks of pre-ignition, which is basically them putting on burn, she takes half of those stacks. So basically the lost stacks that would have been applied. So say you put up 8 stacks of burn in a turn, right? Those 4 stacks that would disappear go to Isolde, and when she reaches a certain amount of heat, then she goes to a different stage. So she goes from the beginning state to interlude to finale. And finale is where you want to be because her skills get better boosted, because it gets penetration rate as an additional bonus, which, again, you're not really looking at Isolde for big damage or anything. She can put up some pretty decent numbers on her follow-up, especially after ult, because she gives the team rousing morale, which is 50% damage dealt up for one action only. So you have to be careful when you cast it, of course. Isolde, unfortunately, doesn't really get the keep it for anything, because she's gonna then follow up automatically. It's not really nothing you can really change. But yeah, Isolde used to be kind of the quintessential support to put into your teams regardless of whatever you were trying to do, because again, 75% potential damage bonus is actually pretty insane. And of course, her being a pretty potent follow-up damage dealer herself, which is really good for chipping away at bosses. Of course, the critical damage support was always more than welcomed. It's even still welcome to this day, because you combine it with newer supports like Argus to really put a lot of critical defense down on an enemy at once. But there was a lot of potential combinations that you can really do to really just make her shine. And she was not really one of those units that really needed much of a region to shine. That was really just it. You know what I mean? Like, she was super easy to operate. She was super easy to pilot, to do what she needs to do, which is control the field with damage, supply power burst for your team, because it's automatic when she gets the finale. As soon as that turn starts, boom, stack of power burst, 25% damage bonus is out of the gate. When you get ultimate, boom, rousing morale, and now your units can deal, more damage. You know what I mean? That was a really cool thing that I really did like about Isolde. But even still to this day, she still holds up as a prominent support that you can use for a lot of teams. She may not see as much use as she used to when she first dropped, because obviously a lot of people seem to go more positive buffing as opposed to negative buffing, which, again, fine. I mean, that's your own prerogative. That's your way you want to play. But again, if you had to use Isolde, she's still fine, still perfectly fine. So if you pull Isolde, again, a very good support. Alright, the next unit that I'm going to be talking about is actually going to be Marcus. So the reason why I'm putting Marcus on this list is because, well, she's not, by frankly, the best DPS or anything, but she's still very good as an overall DPS. Like, of course, with great support for Vila, you can actually build her into crit, which is actually great, because She really needs to crit. She doesn't have the highest crit rate to critical damage ratio. Even when you do try to give her further external amplifiers like a crit rate card that she can use and stuff like that, but she definitely leans more into the attack side of things as opposed to critical damage side of things. But with other supports like Vila, like Mercuria, or any other opportunity where you can buff up her crit rate, crit damage, that's actually fine, and she can actually be used as a good support there. However, one of the biggest reasons I really wanted to put Marcus on this list natively is because, well, she's one of the best partners for Anjo. One of the best things about Marcus is that she has really good Moxie gain, and that is actually going to be pretty viable for Anjo because that means in retaliation, Anjo herself gets an additional Moxie. Because what this is, because of Marcus's I3 effect, she gets +1 Moxie if you have a team of plant, spirit, or intelligence allies, right? And its personable status is whenever she casts a rank 2 to 3 inconstation, she gets Moxie 1 to self, and that's undispellable, right? You're probably wondering, but how does this work for Anjo? Remember, when Anjo partners up with an ally, they can't gain Moxie at all. But the Moxie that's then gained by that partner goes to Anjo. So if Marcus is taking the turn to cast a 2-star skill, and then the end of the turn, because, oh, not really end of the turn, but the Percival effect kicks in, guess what? That's +2 Moxie straight to Anjo, which again is great because you want to be filling up her ultimate ASAP. Also, not to really mention a little additional bonus that you can also throw in with Marcus, apologies there, but Marcus does also have a negative status called Annotate, where she can actually deal a little bit of extra damage, as you can see right here. Annotate, and she can grant Eureka +1 whenever she attacks the target. But it basically just does a little bit extra damage from Marcus herself, but that again counts as a negative status. And why is that a big thing for Anjo? Well, if you guys don't know, Anjo's ult scales up the more negative statuses that you have. So this is effectively also boosting the modifier of Anjo's ultimate. So that's a really good thing right there. There's two good combinations right there. You give her the Moxie gain, and you give her the extra benefit of having a stronger modifier on ult, right? I mean, and with you having all this Moxie buildup, especially if you can consistently get 2 to 3-star casts with Marcus, you can get into your ultimate fairly quick. Now, of course, that means it would obviously drain a lot of Marcus's HP because, you know, Anjo's downside is that she has to take 50% of their max HP every single time. But, of course, you can just heal it back or be a little bit spacious about how you use the ult. That's really just it. But yeah, that's why I'm recommending Marcus. She's a pretty good unit for that regard. She still does pretty decent damage overall on her own. She's, again, not by any means like a dead unit to be pulling just specifically for Anjo. You can still use her as her very own unit because she's still very good in places like Owl Cryptid. She's still very good in general limbo stages in the core story. So if you do pull Marcus, you shouldn't be disappointed. Still a very good unit. Alright, next up is going to be 37. 37 is on this list strictly because of, well, the partner of Anjo. She's a really good partner for Anjo. Now that I mentioned I mentioned Marcus previously, where I talked about, you know, the whole synergy with the Percival and all this good stuff and all that cool stuff, right? For the extra Moxie acceleration. One of the really cool combinations with Anjo / 37 is it makes for a crazy follow-up spam based team that's AoE, because when she links off with, I believe it's Star, she can get easier access to her follow-up, her AoE follow-up. And I believe it's Spirit and Intelligence that gives her a single target follow-up. And I believe it's I want to say Plant and Star. That gives her the AoE follow-up. I could be mistaken. I'm terribly sorry if I am. But the whole key thing here is that whenever you cast a skill with 37, not only are you giving Eureka to 37, which is of course going to be for her follow-up AoE, you're also allowing for Anjo to then come in and do an AoE follow-up so long as she has the proper buff active. So when she has her buff active and she has that going for herself, she can just start doing AoE damage and she just start shredding. And that's really, really cool. And again, since you do want to kind of actively use 37 a little bit, so that way you can just get some chip damage and of course cause Anjo to do some follow-up, so that way you can get a strong AoE follow-up at the end once her stacks drop. It's a pretty good combination. Now, obviously, P037, since this is technically your first version, doesn't deal the greatest form of damage. I'll be honest, but you're going to be carried by Anjo. Anjo's going to be your damage dealer. I know a lot of people say Anjo's sub, which I agree with the assessment, but with two DPSs potentially kind of dealing the damage, that still can help, and Anjo can still put up some really high numbers even if she's called a sub. So I do think that 37 is a fantastic partner specifically for Anjo. Not really seeing it too much anywhere else. I did see that 37 has kind of been coming up in impromptu based teams, which is a new type of gimmick that recently came out in CN. I will admit I'm not the most well knowledge when it comes to impromptu, so I'll be saving that for a different later video when I learn a little bit more about it. But I will be completely honest to say that she has been kind of coming up a little bit. She has been seeing a little bit more play as of later, but that's in patch 2.4. But the biggest thing that was really holding 37 back is just that there's not really too much of a reason to run her anymore, because even though we are in a follow-up focused meta where we have great pivots like Lucy, we have great pivots like Windsong, we have Jay, we have really good follow-up units. It's just that 37 herself doesn't really contribute the biggest form of damage, being at P0. P2 fixes that entirely. That was my entire reason for pulling the golden thread, by the way. Very smooth brain decision, but hey, we move, and it ended up working out for me. Hey, I know, I won the game. Anyway, jokes aside. But yeah, like, she doesn't really put up the biggest form of damage. She's still kind of relatively when it comes to the DPSing side of things, but she still can work. Also, she's getting a unique skin in 2.2, so if you are going to spend some money, I mean, you can really get her skin. Her skin actually looks really cool, of all things considered. Like, I would say Vila skin is the best, but hey, I'm just a guy. But anyway, one of the biggest reasons why I'm recommending her name is just the partnerization with Anjo. Anything else, you can kind of just leave her out of, but, still a really good option for Anjo-based teams, so, yeah. Alright, so the next hero I'm going to be talking about is 6. Now, I will say that 6 is a little bit on the lower tier when it comes to, like, personal preferences for the purposes of this video, but I will say, like, when I made this video, I definitely want to look at all players, not just veterans. Newer players are definitely included and welcomed in to look at this video, but I think the thing that I would say that's most importantly about 6 is that he's still viable. Like, he's not crept to the point to where you go, ill, why are you running 6 in today's metagame? Obviously, Vila, Mercuria kind of just complete the support core because of them just specifically buffing crit rate, crit damage, which again, 99% of the game's DPS want this. They want this because they want to deal bigger damage. Very simple, very not hard to understand. But 6 is still, quite frankly, a viable buffer because he can buff a lot of things. As you can see here, if we go over to his buffing skill, he can buff the following. He can give pen rate, which is very rare. He can give both incantation might. He can give incantation might 50%, which is actually still viable for a lot of the game's DPSs, being like Marcus and Lucy, for example. Mental and reality defense plus 15%. Not bad. Vitalize, which actually gives them a regen, ricochet, which reflects damage based off of Genesis damage, and that's pretty good. And he also comes packed with debuffs as well. Critical defense minus 30%, pretty good. Reality and mental defense, being able to shred both, pretty good. I mean, you really only ever need one depending on team, so, but kind of but blind, miss aim, fracture. Blind is damage dealt bonus whenever you're attacking single target. Miss aim is whenever you attack multiple targets, and fracture is just additional Genesis damage. So I mean, he still brings purposeful things to your team. He's also a good partner for Anjo, because while this gives Anjo single target follow-up, this still is pretty good because again, it's still accessing her follow-up, which is still very good. Also, being able to debuff fracture, I mean not fracture, being able to debuff reality defense is always going to be really solid. Also, since you're going to be relatively active with 6, because 6 is always going to either be buffing or casting a debuff on an enemy, that again is just quick moxie funneling for Anjo. Because again, remember, as I explained earlier with Marcus, whatever moxie would then go to the other character goes to Anjo. So for example, if I buff for a turn, that's +1 moxie for Anjo. If I debuff for the turn, that's +1 moxie for Anjo. If I do buff, if I do both, that's +2 moxie for the turn. So there's still really viable reasons to actually run them together in the team, because you know he still actively does work. Now, while I will say he's not the most seen as option in today's metagame, obviously the one units that I just named before for meta purposes, obviously, are the more looked at versions, but you can still use other units that are not the most meta to clear content. I don't want people to really look at this video as the definitive meta reason to use this character. Oh, no, I want this to be a video where everyone can kind of learn something from these units. That's why I'm recommending these videos to you guys, because I want to appear, I want to say this video for everyone, you know what I mean? So, but general TLDR, he's still a solid buffer. He's still a fantastic debuffer, and he actually puts a pretty decent damage on his ult as well. If you guys don't know, if you keep this, if you keep the stacks of Eureka that he has, because he has a bonus of 6 stacks, because he's one of those units that has more than 5. Then you get a little bit of a stronger ult, which is pretty good. And by all intents and purposes, still a solid pick in my honest opinion. Alright, so the next unit I'm going to be recommending is actually going to be Two Fairy. Now, while I do consider Vila to 100% be a direct upgrade from Two Fairy, with having a better cleanse effect on ultimate, buffing crit rate, crit damage, modifier buff, and of course being a potentially stronger healer when she's in her unique status, I will not say that you just can't look at Two Fairy and say, I don't think I need her, because she's still going to be a great second healer you can pick up on, because there really isn't too many 6-star healers in the game. If you really prefer to use 6 stars, there's still some great 5-star options like Yensei, who can still very well be a great solid healer for your account. So Two Fairy does kind of feel on the lower side of personal preferences, but she still holds up. You know, like if you really had the option to choose a unit, and well, not really choose because it's random, but if you really had the opportunity and you were to get Two Fairy, she's still viable because she's still a good AoE healer. She can debuff critical resistance, which is actually still pretty viable. She still has a cleanse, which is not as great as Vila because you have to crit to get the cleanse, which is casted on ultimate only. Same thing with Vila, where she has to cast her ultimate to get the cleanse, right? Because it comes off as soon as she transitions to her her unique state. But the problem with Two Fairy is you have to crit, which is you're not really building Two Fairy for crit, unfortunately, because you more so want the higher attacks so you can heal a little bit more potent. So that means you're kind of giving up on some of the crit rate critical, you're kind of giving up on crit rate for skills, and you're kind of like, oof, what am I gonna do? But for all intents and purposes, she still is a solid healer that you can pick up on, especially if you needed like a second healer, or even if it's your first 6-star healer. If this is your first 6-star healer, then don't despair. Don't be like, oh, I could have got Vila. Well, I mean, no, it's still someone who can help you clear all content, because Two Fairy can still be used to clear all content. I mean, she's still very good. She can heal pretty well. She can also give you a passive heal at the end of the turn, and I did just talk about the other things that she can provide for you as well, which of course is the critical resistance down, the RNG chance to cleanse, and you know, just overall being a sustainable unit. The only problem that Two Fairy does have is that she is a bit on the frail side, and she doesn't really have much protection for herself to protect herself from dying. You know, Vila does have things where she can at least give herself sturdiness by healing herself, which is actively a form of protection. She can, you know, she can do double AoE heal on at the end of the turn potentially, or even just one strong AoE heal, which is guaranteed when she's in her unique state. You know, there is ways that she can protect herself from dying. Two Fairy just doesn't have that, unfortunately, but it is what it is, you know what I mean? She's more of an offensive support than a defensive support, and same could be said about Vila too, who is more offensive than defensive. But anyway, that's the general reason why I'm recommending Two Fairy, because she's still a solid unit that you can pick on. Like, she's still the number 2 best healer in the game. She's number 2. She's not just she doesn't have to be number 1 for you to consider to use this unit. And I've seen a lot of people say, I don't really know about Two Fairy these days, but no, man, she still works. So long as a unit works, it's still a viable reason to get the unit. Well, unless you obviously want to save your pulls, which is obviously arguably the smarter way to go about it. But if we're getting a 6-star and this happens to be your 6-star, I wouldn't be mad about it. Alright, the next unit, and you may be surprised to see this unit on your list, but it's actually going to be Sotheby. You're probably wondering, wait, why 1.0? Why would you want a 1.0 unit? And that, my friends, is strictly because Euphoria. If you guys don't know, in patch 2.3, there is going to be a new quality of life that's rolled out and a new exclusive indie game related content called Euphoria, or called Reveries, right? So these Reveries will give you materials where you can then upgrade old 6-star units for them to gain new effects and new passives, kind of similarly to kind of like a rework in a way where they can change up some stuff about a unit. And Sotheby's Euphoria, it's actually insane, because what Sotheby actually becomes is she becomes an anchor to the poison team for support reasons. One of the really most impactful things that Sotheby gets is that her cure stacks, which is off of her concentrated essence skill, this skill right here, actually stacks. So that means she can have multiple casts of cure, and she gets additional poison damage, which of course scales just straight up off of any applied instance of poison. She also had a special unique card, I didn't get it, which I'm actually kicking myself for, in her antidote. If you actually gotten the chance to do her antidote, there's a 5-star card that you can get that can boost up poison damage up to 40%, which is actually best in slot for Willow. And this really is just another good reason for you to bump up damage. And the reason why she's so really good is because she can also detonate poison stacks at will with her ultimate, which is what you're going to be doing with Tuesday anyway if you're running Tuesday comms, which is the whole primary reason of why you should be running poison in the first place. But even without poison, Sotheby does actually still see some significant use because of just how potent of a healer she actually becomes because of the stackable stacks of cure. But you won't really see Sotheby too much outside of poison teams, because she's more so just that anchor for those teams. She doesn't really get out of other teams because of obviously the other better options that exist in the other teams, like follow up, like general standard DPSing, the J Babel team, which doesn't run a healer anyway, you know, like you won't really see her in those teams. But you'll see Sotheby in poison because of all of the new bonuses that she then provides for the poison. The extra additional poison damage. Of course, you have a unique antidote that's an even bigger bonus. You can allow for her to be a sustainable healer for the team because she can stack up her stacks of cure, which is really, really good. And she actually does heal quite a bit consistently now due to the upgrades that she got. So all intents and purposes, Sotheby becomes very, very, very solid post Euphoria. So if you ended up getting her, she's actually really good. Actually, like, and it's crazy. I can't wait to talk about this more in depth when I do the 2.3 tier list and I talk about the Reverie units and talk about how impactful was their Euphoria. But yeah, Sotheby is definitely one of the units, especially if you have the right units for a built-up poison team, being Tuesday, being herself. You got yourself a pretty spicy combo going on there, and that's why I recommend Sotheby. Alright, so the next and final unit that I'm going to be recommending for this video is going to be Miss New Babel. Again, this is going to be mainly because of this unit getting Euphorias in patch 2.3, which is again something that you can pivot over to the next version for. But Babel kind of creates a brand new structure comp known as the J Babel comp. You may have made me say this, you may have maybe heard me say this a few times in the video, but what is the J Babel comp in a nutshell? It's basically just a you being indestructible from normal damage in most generic situations, which is pretty cool. So what this is, you know how Jay can put up some really high level shields when he's at low HP? Well, one of the only caveats to this is that you can't really find any way to further increase the shield. This is where Babel comes in. Babel actually has an effect where she can actively put more HP to the shield strength, meaning that the shield can get stronger, which is actually really cool. Also, Babel can also further than also use her new wave skill, which is the buffing skill, more times. So, for example, right? Not only can she just naturally do it on her own turn if you felt the need to just make your shield stronger, but when an enemy attacks you, that's an instant cast of a new wave that's only once per round. But if you have a person who does follow-up attacks 3 times in a round, then she will then cast it again. And guess who happens to have a very easy time casting follow-up attacks? No, you guessed it, Jay. So if you end up having Jay, then getting Babel actually ends up becoming a very high priority pick for you because this makes a very strong defensive core alongside a support from someone like Kakania, where you can really make yourself just impregnable. There's even some very funny combinations you can do, like Necrologist with this team, because you can continuously keep triggering the prayer effect so long as Necro herself doesn't die. But you can then make Jay unkillable. You can make Babel new killable so long as you just have ultimate ready. That's also 50% damage debuff if you have her at P5, or 30% if you have her at P0, which is also a great form for him to actively amplify his own damage. There's a lot of really interesting supports you can run with the team, honestly. You don't really run a healer in J Babel comps because the whole core of the team is obviously for Jay to deal as much damage as possible, and you're really more so relying on the effect of the shields to just hold you through, which they should because of the continuous the continuous stacking of Babel. Babel is going to continuously keep putting up a new wave, and then you're gonna have more chances to survive for that turn, which is why I just again think that she's just a great unit. I just think now Babel is in a great prime spot. If you don't have Jay, then Babel, while I still do think will actually become a pretty good sustain because of what she is doing, it's more so just specific to it's more so specific to a set team, right? She's not as open as Sotheby is because you can kind of get away with Sotheby being a healer in a different team because of the stackable cure thing. But with Babel, I don't know if you could get away with Babel being in any other team outside of JComs. You know what I mean? She's not as free as with Jay as she would be with someone else, is what I would say. But over and all, that's why I'm recommending Babel, and that's going to be all the units that I have here for you guys here today. If you have any other interesting options, please let me know in the comment section below. There were some other units that I wanted to put on here, like Lilia, because her Euphoria is actually pretty strong too. But I was kind of like, I kind of want to just, I think you can actually live without Lilia's Euphoria. But anyway, this has been your boy Stingren. I'll see you guys next time. Peace.